Hey everyone, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast. We have a pretty awesome episode this week. We have a guest all the way from Australia, which is why we're doing this on Friday instead of a Thursday. Thank you for joining us, Colum. Why don't you introduce yourself?
No, not a problem. Thanks for having me. My name's Colum, and I have a little YouTube page that I go through all my aquaponic stuff on, and I've been doing it for a while now, and Steve invited me here, so I thought I'd come along and say good day to everybody. So, good day.
Good day to you, and good evening to everybody in the States.
Yep. And we also have with us those of you guys that are from the DGC. We have Fish Ganja Guy, which for the purposes of this episode, we're just going to call Fish. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, man. Happy to be on as always. Good hearing from you. Hope you're enjoying the weather we're getting right now.
Yeah, we're getting hammered. Also, I just wanted to say that to everyone that's listening. If I do go offline and don't come back, it's because the power went out here. We have one of the worst storms come hit us in a decade in California is slamming into San Diego right now, and all of Southern California for that matter. So if either I or Fish goes offline, that's what happened.
I've got perfect weather out here, so hopefully I'll keep it going.
Yeah, thankfully we have someone on a different continent, so we definitely have to worry about that storm causing a total show end. But I did have one quick preface I want to mention real quick. I wanted to say a big shout out to True Aquaponics. You guys can go to trueaquaponics.com. Let me double check that. Make sure it's not .org. I should have checked that beforehand. Anyways, yeah, trueaquaponics.com. I have just partnered up with them. I'll be doing all their customer consulting in the future for them. So if you guys ever need help with your vegetable garden or your commercial design or anything like that, definitely give them a ring. Or if you're looking for, powder nutrients, individual nutrients, or even multi-packs based on your system, definitely go check them out. And there's no, it's not a paid advertisement. There's no payment between him and I. We're just working together to achieve the same goal. So thanks a lot to him and his support, and we're glad to make that announcement. Colum, why don't you tell us about how you got started with aquaponics, and why don't you start? We'll start off there.
Yeah, so that sounds good. So the first thing I saw about it was I was randomly looking around Reddit, which I do way too much. But I was going through there and I saw a post on it, and I just fell in love with the idea the first second I saw it. And it just seemed so much easier, and it made so much sense. And then the next trickiest thing was convincing my wife to let me do it. So I went for about 6 months of trying to convince her every single day. Like I'd say, aquaponics, it's going to be fantastic. And one day she came home, I was digging a big ass hole in the backyard and welding up a frame for it, and that's basically how it started. She eventually started to see that it did work and it wasn't completely crap, so she got along with it when I started bringing in herbs and tomatoes and fantastic things outside. And since then, they just haven't been able to stop me. I've expanded it over my backyard. I've been building up my YouTube channel, which has been going through it, and I just love it. You fish, you pick your fruit and veg out of it, and it's just really so easy.
Oh, totally.
For those of you that haven't had a chance to check out your channel, so why don't you tell people about what it is that you do, and about your systems and how you came to about your YouTube channel, and yeah.
Okay, so basically how I started the YouTube channel was I'm on the forums way too much. So Backyard Aquaponics, the Reddit ones, and those sort of things. And I was just posting random things about showing how stuff was growing in the backyard. And I had people saying, why don't you say anything in the videos? And I thought, yeah, why not? So I started talking, and I started making very simple little videos. This is the tomato, this is how I grow it, and this is how I string them up in the system, and just random things like that. And it's just continued to evolve off that. Had people started subscribing, then more people started subscribing, and it's just basically gone on from then. It wasn't anything I planned on doing. I didn't go out thinking, oh, this is going to be awesome, but I just kept on uploading content and things that interested me, and it's been going on from there. So now I'm sitting on about 20,000 subscribers, which I'm pretty cool, happy about. And I'm on about 4.5 million views all up on YouTube, which is pretty cool. I'm quite happy with that. And yeah, I think it's just pretty easy.
Yeah, I'm looking at your page right now, man. You've got about 19,000 people and a couple million views. I Man, I feel like we should be
Yeah.
on your show right now, not the you on the Aquaponic show.
I haven't done any podcasts before, so wasn't quite sure. I've been more paranoid that nobody would really want to rock up and listen to me waffle on. So, yeah, I'll just think about it in the future.
Yeah, and we feel honored that we're the first podcast, and I also it's really awesome that you're the first live Australian guest that we've been able to get on the show. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we've had some
No.
not living Australian guests apparently.
Yeah, we've had some zombie Australian guests, you know.
But thank you for being the first live one. We do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Happy to help.
What are some things that you've noticed that are kind of different between the U.S. aquaponic industry and or culture, and then the Australian industry and or culture? That is there anything that stands out to you in that aspect?
The biggest thing that I can really see the difference between the two of them is climate. Because I look at some of the US sites and some of the US pages and everything freezes over the winter, which would make a massive difference. Because at the moment, in the middle of winter, I can grow lettuce, I can grow basil, I can grow pretty much everything I want in the backyard. But you guys, it freezes over, so I wouldn't have any idea how to look after the fish when the top of the tank's freezing over and those sort of things. So we get a much longer time to grow everything, I think. And that comes into one of the major differences between the two of them. I understand there's a big area of difference in the climate over there, but from what I've seen online, there's just, and I can grow perennials and everything out there. So things like strawberries, I can grow year round. I've got passion fruit, which are growing outside in the weather and that sort of stuff, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, everything just grows really well and really easily. And where I live in Adelaide, Australia, we have a really dry climate. So over summer, it's pretty much useless trying to grow anything in the soil because we don't rain for about 4 months of the year, and we get 40-degree heat waves, which I think that works out to about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. It's just massive temperature difference. And if you try and grow anything in the soil, my soil here is horrible clay. So growing anything without chucking in masses of compost and all those sort of things, it's just incredibly hard. So that's where aquaponic comes in really, really good for me. I set it up, I pump the water throughout the whole thing. It doesn't use that much water, and it's just so easy. I can be really, really lazy, and it just works.
That's wonderful. What are some of your favorite crops to grow in aquaponics, or stuff you found that does particularly well? And then is there anything that's kind of, I guess, less traditional or less common that you might want to suggest to people?
The biggest thing that I usually grow is tomatoes. So I've got, I think it's about 8 beds out the back, and 6 of them are devoted towards tomatoes at the moment. So I just grow way too many of them, and I've been bottling them up, collecting seeds, and just trying all of the different varieties I've got. I've tried pretty much everything I can in the system. So I've tried fruit trees, which didn't do particularly well. I've got strawberries growing like crazy in there, rhubarb, anything that I can think of that I grow in the ground. I've tried growing it in aquaponics, and it all just, with the exception of a couple of things like potatoes, which don't like growing in the aquaponics, they just come out really wonky. And I like to experiment. So anything really. I just whack it in the ground and whack it in the beds, and it just grows. I can't imagine there's that much difference in what you can grow, just the climate and what you can continue to grow. So I've got raspberry canes, which are growing quite well inside of it. I've got perennial herbs, which just keep on going year round throughout it. And
what are your favorite tomato varieties that you like to grow?
it depends on which ones you want. So I've got Romas out there, which go really, really well for sauce. You just get so much fruit out in one go. But if you're going the very, very best tomato, the one that I like the most, there's black cherry, which are just sweet. They grow so prolifically, and they are just an awesome fruit to get out of it. I've had some other ones, like those little Roma cherries that just grow like crazy, little yellow broad ripples, and I've got a whole little booklet of seeds that I've bought online, and I've probably got about 50, 60 different varieties in there, which I'm trying to circle my way through if I went a bit crazy buying them. And sadly, I don't have enough room to grow all of them every single year. So yeah, I just keep on going through it and see what I can find.
That's awesome. Is there any particular varieties of other crops you'd like to suggest to people, or they think might, any other, I guess, oddball crops that you found as particularly well in aquaponics that you've tried to grow?
There's one that I've got. So have you guys heard of a chop and come again sort of lettuce?
What was the variety? I'm sorry.
It's a sort of lettuce it is. It's a chocolate and grow sort of variety of lettuce. So when I get this one, it's ones that you can chop the leaves off and they keep on coming back. So it keeps on coming back. So it doesn't try and form a head, but you can keep on chopping off different leaves. So I've discovered when you get those sort of seeds, if you oversow them in a media bed, they will just keep on coming up and you'll get a massive bushy just growth of lettuce, and you can keep on chopping up as much as you want. So from about a meter by meter bed, I had enough lettuce for probably about 20, 30 salads a week, which was really cool. And it just keeps on coming back and back. And that's one of my favorite ones to grow in it. So I haven't seen that much other people doing it, because I'll see a lot of people that grow nice, fantastic heads of lettuce, but I just grow this sort that's a nice, sweet lettuce leaf, and you just keep on chopping off. So making a salad, go in there, chop off what I need, throw it straight in the bowl, and within a week, it's grown back to the point that you can chop it again, and you just get so much out of it. And I say I've got some seeds wonderful there somewhere, but yeah, it's just one that grows really, really well. I haven't had any trouble at all with it. It's just really simple: sprinkles, chop, done.
So what do you guys do? What is your kind of your go-to pest control down there in Aussie land? I know that you guys have some different products or different thoughts on that for aquaponics.
Pest control, I am extremely lazy. So to be honest, this entire season, I haven't done anything for pests. There's been nothing at all I've done. I haven't really needed to, because that's one of the good things about the climate in Adelaide. We don't have to worry about fruit flies, which you have to in Queensland and those sort of places. The worst I usually get is little caterpillars, and you get this bacterial dipel spray that you get. So it's a little powder you mix through water, you spray it on there, the caterpillars eat it up, and then they start headbanging for a little while, fall off and die. And apart from that, the only other ones I usually have trouble with is ants. And then I'll basically follow little ant trails back to the nest and put antrid, which is a sticky sort of ant killer stuff. You put it around it, they'll all start eating it, they'll take it back from the nest, and it usually wipes out the nest. And apart from that, I haven't had much trouble, apart from slugs and snails. But I figure I let the chickens out, the chickens run around the ground and around the beds, and they all seem to disappear, which is quite cool. I've had massive infestations of slugs before, but you let the chickens out and they give me really, really red yolks after they munch down on all the slugs and the snails and everything, and it works quite well. But apart from that, I haven't done anything at all. It's just, I'd be lazy with it.
You know what the secret weapon against slugs and snails is, right?
What?
You go take some butter trays or a shallow bowl, something with a real short lip that they, you can kind of half put down your throat, and you put beer in there. They love beer, and they drown they die from the alcohol because they absorb it through their skin and their body, and they end up overdosing on alcohol.
You'll have to check out my video, The Slug War, The Great Slug War. I did a whole lot of trialing, so I got some, I Googled as much as I could to try and figure out which one was the best remedy for it, because I got a little time lapse that I took on one of the beds overnight, and they were just absolutely swarming with slugs. I was quite amazed with it. So I started doing a whole lot of tests, because I read that you could use stuff for beer, you could use a little yeast mixture that goes inside of it. And the thing that actually surprised me, when I put it on it, you look at the slugs going for it, and you see a lot at the bottom of it, but a lot of them will drink it, and I think they just get a little bit drunk or a little bit tipsy and then wander off. Because I just found massive videos. Hold on, I'll link the video in the comments down below.
Well, if you send it to me, I'll put it in the description. Yeah, shoot it to me in an email, and I'll add it to the description of the podcast.
Yeah, but I've got a video there of it going through it, and it just shows you the just because I was quite surprised. I thought when you see that many of the dead slugs in the little containers at the end of the day that they would keep on eating it and they'll just be dying, but they just seem to have they just seem to sip and run off. About 90% of them have a sip of it and run off, and then you get 10% that are left in it. I was quite surprised because I'm just getting quite happily drunk off my drink of beer myself.
Yeah, right. Like you're just providing free alcohol for the little bastards.
Yeah, they're eating my fruit and veg, and then they're drinking my beer, the little bastards. So yeah, I found the best thing was to let the chickens out. The chickens out, they'll go through, they'll pick them all off, they'll quite happily give me very red yolks, and they eat all the slugs, which is quite fun. I hear that the ducks are a lot better for it, but I can't really have any ducks in the backyard. So chickens do quite well.
Now, did you find anything else that worked in all that testing?
Not really. I found the chickens. I did have some other tests planned, but I figured the chickens let out. I didn't think they would eat too many of them, but I took a time lapse about 2 days after I let the chickens out, and they were pretty much gone, which was quite cool.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, so when you check the video out after the podcast, you'll see how many there were in there, and it was just an insane amount of bugs.
And what other type tests or longer term things have you worked on, or tests that people can visit videos on your site?
One of the ones that's a bit of a long-term test for me this year is I've been trialing different nutrient profiles for growing things like tomatoes, because the normal like fertilizer you get out of fish poo and you run on nitrates and that sort of stuff throughout it is very, very good for growing things like lettuce. So there's a very high nitrogen content in the natural fish fertilizer that goes through it, and a lot of that is way too high for tomatoes. So I've been practicing in adding things like potassium nitrate into the system, and to keep it pretty much in line with what the professional hydro tomato growers do. So I've been watching my calcium levels, I've been watching the phosphorus and those sort of things throughout the season, and just comparing the growth this season towards the growth last season with the nutrients a lot more targeted towards the tomatoes. And I found that it's been working really, really well. Like, just for an example, I've had about twice as many tomato fruit out of it as what I got last year, and from about the same amount of area, which is an incredible increase on what I've been doing. So those are the sort of things I've been doing. On the downside, it means that my lettuce have been growing like absolute crap at the moment. They seem to get very stunted and then shoot to seed within about 2 seconds. And I haven't been able to grow lettuce at all this season, which is annoying as all hell. Things like basil as well have been quite surprising. I haven't been able to grow too many of them. But I think I've been playing around with the nutrient levels and keeping the nitrates down as well, because tomato growth doesn't grow very, very well if the nitrates are too high. You just get way too much leafy growth and you don't have as much fruit out of it. So that's one of the longer term ones. I've got a video that will be coming out soonish about it once it gets a little bit closer towards the end of the season, because I just wanted to get through the season and see if it works before I started recommending it to people.
Wonderful.
Working really well.
Have you ever tried growing your tomatoes or peppers with a dual root zone method at all, or?
Not really. I haven't really thought about it too much, to be honest. But I know it would probably work. Like, you put it inside of a basket, inside of the media bed, and then you can add more nutrients to the soil. But yeah, the amount of tomatoes I've got in there, I find it's easy to dose up the whole system and keep it going that way.
Sure.
It's just been working really well.
Yeah, I've definitely found that doing flowering crops in one system and then your leafy green type crops in another is definitely a far easier way to do it than trying to do them both in the same system.
Yeah, it's just something to grow as well. Like, they'll grow all right together, but you won't get the fantastic growth when they're both towards their peak, what they'll grow. So I started Googling around and I found the optimum nutrient levels and everything for tomatoes, and they're very different to the optimum growing temperatures and growing techniques for lettuce. But I like tomatoes more than I do lettuce, so yeah, I've been growing them more. And things like strawberries have been thriving in the same environment, so I've got strawberries in there and they've been going nuts. I've got passion fruit that's been growing like crazy in the system as well, under the same sort of system, and yeah, it just grows quite well.
Wonderful. Are you still there, Fish Ganja Guy? I don't mean to interrupt you, Colum.
I am.
I just found out that Fish Ganja Guy had an emergency come up. He's going to have to run here in 15 to 20 minutes. Would you mind if we switch guests real quick, and then we'll come back and ask you some more questions, Colum? Is that okay?
Yeah.
No, sorry about that, man. It's a little unplanned. I just got the text message a minute ago that I'm going to have to cut out in a few.
Yeah, he just all of a sudden had something come up. So if we can quick get in a few questions with him real quick, is that okay?
Yeah, all good. Go for it.
Wonderful.
Then hopefully if things are able to clear up, I can get back on the show.
Absolutely. How are you? How have you been? I know you've been doing a little bit of work trying to plan some new stuff. And how's your grow going? You had a bunch of great cool videos on your YouTube channel lately.
Man, harvest was fantastic. Couldn't be better. Everything's curing wonderfully. I got one of my critical cure phenos. It smells like good cheddar cheese. I got another one. It smells like some kind of pepper jack. I can't wait to check some of these out. And then something I'm going to be doing on my channel and in my grow coming up is I've got a little side-by-side study I'm doing, building a new grow room next week. And I have one of my old Phytomax 400s from Black Dog, and I'm going to be getting one of the brand new Phytomax 2 series from Black Dog in the next like 2 weeks. And I'm going to be running that against 2 Spectrum King 400s.
Are they the new ones? The new ones?
From Spectrum King?
Yeah. Like the computer, it looks like a computer CPU cooler on it, kind of.
Are you talking about the 600? Because
I think I'm talking about the 600s. The ones I was just over at the dude. The last trip I was back in Colorado, I was over at the dude from the Dude Grow Show's house.
Yeah, that's the 600.
Okay.
No, those things are beasts. But
Oh my God, those things are like absolute daylight. It's like you turn that light on and it was like, holy shit. But that is
yeah.
the brightest light I think
Even
I've
in the
ever seen in my
400s,
entire
I
life.
turned one of those on and I had a relative
They're
over,
ridiculous too.
and she kind of glanced over her shoulder towards where I was. Like 10 minutes later, she's like, "Am I going to stop seeing this stupid ring of light?"
Yeah, it takes like 30 minutes for your eyes to not burn. Yeah, it's insane. So if you think that's bad, you should see the 600. The 600 is absolutely insane.
Yeah, but I'm super stoked on that. I'm going to be running these the two 400s for the guys over at Spectrum King, and seeing what these differences in spectrums are going to do for the plants. So at the end of the study, I'm going to be doing. 'Cause I'm going to have all kinds of plants in there, but the ones that are under the lights for the study, they're going to be from the same mother, same cuts and everything, and they're getting the same fish water, same nutrients. Only difference is the spectrum. And at the end of the study, I'm going to do weights, but more importantly, what I'm concerned with is the potency testing, and also when I see the terpene profiles that the different spectrums of light can bring out. So,
well, remind me when you come. Remind me when I see you to add to your project.
you're gonna have to say that again. Storm's getting to you.
Oh, I said, remind me when you come down next month and I see you to give you some seeds for your project.
Oh, rock and roll, man.
Oh, I forgot. I'm sorry. I screwed up. That should be clearer now. My audio should be a little cleaner. I didn't realize I moved my modem for a second.
Yeah, you're good now. Did you get the email that I sent you a few minutes ago with the link?
Yes, I did. If you guys are looking to check out Fish Ganja Guy's channel, definitely it'll be in the description. I'm gonna add it here in a few minutes. If you're looking for more, he's real. Both him and I are very regularly on the Do Grow show. Very good friends with those guys over there, and I'm pretty close to where he is, and about 2.5 hours away, maybe 3. So we see each other on a regular basis, and they're collaborating on a bunch of stuff. So definitely check out his channel.
True, true. And yeah, the latest video is the harvest episode. So it's basically just a nice little slideshow to music of some good bud shots showing people what you really can bring some amazing quality with aquaponics. You don't have to go with hydro to get something that's pretty, but you can get it with aquaponics, and you can get the great flavor and beyond what you would get with soil. So it's definitely worth checking out.
The flavor is not even comparable. Like it's like laughably different.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Let's see what else is going on. So for this new room, I'm going to be breaking down the vegetable garden that I have over at my folks' place, so that way I can use the 275-gallon IBC tote and all the tilapia and koi that I have on that. And I'm going to bring it over to where my medical grow is, and gonna have to scrub down all the 4x4 grow beds and make sure they're all sterile before I put them in, and nothing nasty from outside. So I'm gonna have some companion planting going and get some chives and some basil, oregano, and some what was it? Some mint. But I know mint's roots will grow wild, so I'm gonna make sure to keep that in a fabric pot to contain it. But
are you gonna be doing any? I know you're about to build a new grow room. Are you gonna do any build videos?
Not really, because I'm just going to try and knock that thing out in like a day. I'll explain the room and how we did it, maybe in a video. But as far as building the room, my buddy and I were just going to knock that out in an afternoon. So we're just going to be focusing on that.
You should make a you should document that. Throw up a camera, throw up your phone or something, and record it. Or at
I don't
least
want to be
chunks of
playing
it
with the
so you
chop
can
saw
edit
while
it.
I've got the Deadpool mask going. I want to keep all my fingers.
No. I know, but I mean, like, at least maybe even a step by step. It doesn't necessarily have to be while you're cutting wood.
Yeah.
But I think that would a lot of people would be interested in that. I think for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I might be able to get some shots in there. Plus, I'm going to be filming in the next week how to do a radial flow filter. I'm building a new one to put next to the grow room, so that way I have less solids floating into the tank. Since I'm not doing them a foot deep in media like I was originally, I'm trying to do it the way that I saw in your setup over in Colorado, where you just have your biofilter as the bottom half of the pots with the hydrogen in there. My one concern did come true, where there was a lot of excess fish solids coming through, and also some of the algae that I had to deal with. So I'm going to try and at least eliminate the fish solids, and the algae I'll just maybe put a pleco or some small pleco up on each grow bed.
Yeah, we only had about 20 fish in that tank, so I guess it was deceiving in certain ways.
Were they full sized?
About half of them were younglings. But what I was doing is I was keeping just a handful of fish that I particularly liked color wise, and the rest were getting kicked out to the greenhouse. So,
okay. Hey, Colum, what kind of fish do you have going?
Goldfish basically. I've tried trout and I've tried Murray cod and those sort of things, but I don't really like eating freshwater fish that much. It doesn't taste the greatest. So yeah, just goldfish. I've been trying to breed them, so I've got some breeding experiments that I've been going through them, and yeah, goldfish. Simple, easy. They're quite hardy.
Do you do any Aranda goldfish? The ones with the big bubbly heads?
Yep. My biggest video on YouTube is doing surgery on one of those guys.
You know, I think I've actually seen that video before, where you to get one of the wen off by the eye or something.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I saw that video. That was you. Okay. Yeah, because you ever have any swim bladder issues with them, where they just keep floating to the top?
Yeah, it happens every now and again with some of them. There's not much you can. You can change feed and everything, but there's not much you can do when they've got a really bad genetic deformity like that.
There's a good question.
Some of them just don't.
Because I've got one it's still bobbing at the top, man. I've been doing everything.
So you've treated him with this. So he originally, Fish Ganja Guy had actually messaged me privately about this, and I told him to give him a saltwater dip. And traditionally, not always, but I would say about 80 to 90% of the time, when you give the fish a salt dip what you do is about a pound of salt water in a 5-gallon bucket. And this works for ick, external parasites, and swim bladder issues. And the reason why it works on swim bladder issues is because fish have evolved a mechanism with their swim bladder where if the saline level is beyond a certain point that comes through their nostrils, which happen to have sensors that detect saline level, which is how salty the water is, they regulate the salt level in their blood based on the surrounding water, and they kind of balance for that. Their kidneys do. So I forget if it's kidneys or liver. I'm 99% sure it's the kidneys, though. Sorry, I'm just a little bit fuzzy today. I've been kind of a really, really good day that I can't tell any of you guys about because I'm under NDA right now. But I'll have some amazing announcements here in a couple of months. So I've been celebrating almost slightly too much. Anyways, some of the people on the podcast know a little bit about it. But yeah, I had a lot of new people I'm going to be working with that had a lot of good news to say today. But how it works is when you give the fish a big salinity change, for instance, when you mix up about a pound of aquarium salt in a 5-gallon bucket, it mixes the salinity up to 0.018, which is specific gravity, which is not quite seawater, but pretty close. When you put a freshwater fish in there for about a minute or two, what happens is the fish, its swim bladder detects that the salinity is dramatically different than the surrounding water. So it causes this forced contraction, which immediately expels all the water out of, or air, depending on how the fish is trying to be. The fish can fill it with water or air, depending on the surrounding water, based on salinity and buoyancy, and there's a couple other factors that work into that. But anyways, so basically when the salinity is too much different than where they just were, meaning you bring the fish from an aquarium with fresh water over to an aquarium that is saltwater, when that happens, it triggers the fish to have a forced contraction of that swim bladder. And when the swim bladder contracts, it expels all the water or air that's in there, and it fills up with the salt water, or it fills up with the appropriate amount of air. When that happens, you're helping flush out any infection or pus, or flush it with salt water, or it causes multiple different beneficial reactions in the fish when it causes that forced reaction. Then you leave them in there for about a minute to a minute and a half, and then you put them back into the fresh water, and it basically breathes back in fresh water. Now, when you slam around both the pH in a very short period of time, which is okay, you know, a minute and a half is okay. It won't hurt the fish at all. Or you slam the salinity in that short a period of time, the microbes, be it anchor worm, ick, a swim bladder infection, not always, but a large percentage, 75 to 80% of the time, that happens to cure those issues. And the issues, in the sake of ick, the salinity difference, the buoyancy difference causes the eggs to burst on the outside of the fish. You can also do the same thing with saltwater and freshwater. So if I have a saltwater fish that has saltwater ick or saltwater flukes, I can put them in fresh water for a minute and a half. And that minute and a half exposure to fresh water causes the cell walls on those flukes or the ick to burst and basically explode. And you can hear them pop. Like if you put your ear up against the side of it, it'll sound like popcorn. It's amazing. I've done it when I worked in the pet industry because it was the gentlest way to treat these problems that were chronic issues with wild caught fish or otherwise, heavily bred fish coming over from Asia that were in, big fish farms or XYZ problem. This was just one of the gentlest ways without using medication that would, cause other potential issues or hurt my microbial level and hurt my biological filter, or it was just the gentlest way without screwing up as much other things in the store as possible. And that was one of the things that I learned a lot during that, but that's one of the things that I definitely, I suggested to Fish Ganja Guy. Sorry, I realized it took way too long for that explanation, but I feel like it was a fairly detailed explanation.
A very detailed explanation. But yeah, I've tried that. I've tried warming up the water to help with the digestion. I've tried feeding them some boiled peas every now and then after I deshell them. And nothing's working, man. He's just bobbing at the top.
Hey, every once in a blue moon, you get one that's like that. I also, the other common, I would say common if you're dealing in the pet trade or dealing with an unusually large number of fish, is that they'll get this genetic deformity to their not cell walls, abdominal wall, where their rib cage and the abdominal wall will get extremely rounded, and they'll look almost like they swallowed a golf ball or swallowed a volleyball or whatever. You see it in goldfish or koi sometimes, and there's a couple of breeds that even have it as stabilized, where they're spherical fish.
Well, yeah, they're chubby fish. I mean,
yep.
They're rondas.
And other common genetic mutations are the anus being on the side of the fish or behind the gills or behind the pectoral fins especially, and not where it's supposed to be. And
I don't know how common that is. I've never seen that.
When you breed lots of koi and goldfish and guppies and other tropical fish, you see all kinds of weird stuff on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's pretty weird.
Yeah, goldfish are really good at mutating. Like the amount of different varieties you get from two adults that are exactly the same is incredible. Because one of my last breeding ones, I had some just things like when you get fantail goldfish and you try and breed them, the amount of single tail ones you get out of it is just crazy. So just so many genetic throwbacks. So I imagine a lot of it doesn't work out quite well for the fish.
That's a great topic. In fact, I'm so glad you brought that up. So for those of you that don't know, which is probably a large percentage of you that have purchased goldfish or koi before, only about the fish that hit the stores are about 10 to 15%, maybe 20 at max, of the fish that the parents bred. Most of the other ones were culled out as feeder fish or destroyed or used as fertilizer, which a lot of people aren't aware of. For koi, fancy goldfish and all those other, particularly strange looking goldfish that do not look anything like a normally shaped fish. What do they call it? I want to say purge rate, but the cull rate, I'm sorry. The cull rate on them is extremely high. And you have to remember that 20 to 30% of them are going to come out as black or brown, which are automatically like not sold into the market because they're too dark. So those usually end up as fertilizer before the gold and the yellow ones, which generally end up as feeder fish or if they're undesirable. So, did Fish Ganja have to step out or? Okay, so since you had to step out, let's go back to you, Colin. I apologize for having to switch gears. I normally don't do that. It was just a matter
Yes.
of.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I gotta get going.
Okay,
But
I
hopefully I'll be able
appreciate
to get
you
back in a little
joining us.
bit, man.
We'll have a link to your podcast and everything. Your I'm not sorry, podcast, your channel and everything on the description and everything like that.
Right. And Colum, it was great meeting you, man. Have a great day in Australia.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy your storm.
Yeah. Do my best.
Looks like it's going to be a fun one. Have a good one.
The wind is slamming my window sideways right now, which is pretty awesome. So, Colin, why don't you tell us about what are some things that you found that have been maybe underserved or not publicized, or things that you found that have been particularly useful in the aquaponics, and as far as aquaponics growing and the aquaponics industry is, I'm a real passionate about silica, for example. I talk about that a lot. What are some things that you found that maybe other people don't know or aren't aware of, and could definitely benefit from?
The biggest thing I think is how much people overcomplicate the whole system. So you look at some of the forums and you look at some of the Facebook posts and those sort of things, and you see how confusing the whole thing actually looks from somebody that doesn't know anything about it. Just how incredibly confusing aquaponics can look. People have got filters, and it just doesn't need to be that way. Because they've all got their own uses, and you can tinker as much as you want with the system, but it all grows just so well without doing that much at all to it, which is one of the good things I like about it. And it doesn't need to be complicated, because you're just pretty much you're pumping water from the fish tank into the grow bed, and then letting the grow bed clean the water and take out all the ammonia and nitrates and stuff. And that is pretty much all that's involved, because I've seen some horribly confusing systems. I've seen some ones that just don't make any sense at all. And people that were playing with bell siphons and putting on little breather tubes, and just way people like to overcomplicate things, which is, I think, one of the biggest things. Inside of the systems that I've got growing, I just keep it really simple, because I don't play around with too many things. I've got a little seeding bed that I use to start seeds off. I take them straight out of there, put them straight in the grow beds, and that's pretty much about it. I don't play around with too many things. I've tried a couple of different medias for growing seedlings and everything. I've tried different gravels for see if there's any difference in growth, and I haven't noticed anything. Yeah, it just all grows quite well without me doing very much at all.
That's definitely. I'm glad you brought up the snorkel thing on the bell siphons. That's definitely one of the things that I realized was like, it's over-engineered, and unless you're doing extremely large flood and drain beds, you don't need a snorkel. Now, that's so the biggest thing that I've noticed, and maybe or I guess I'll ask you at the end, is the biggest thing I've noticed with the bell siphon design is that, one, people don't cut a deep enough air gap for people to allow air to vent in at the base of their bell siphon, and then two, they don't have enough of a vertical drop and then a 90-degree, like two 90-degree angles in order to get that proper air seal post bulkhead after the actual bell siphon, in order to get the proper vacuum chamber, vacuum pressure, I'm sorry, is the better way to state it, in that bell siphon. Now, as long as you do those two things, and you have a minimum of about a 4-inch vertical drop below your bulkhead, and at least a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of cut on how big your ventilation cut is at the very base of your bell siphon, I find that at the base of your bell siphon, that's a great way.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I found out as well. When I first started playing with them, I had it all sealed up at the bottom, and they couldn't get air back through it. And like I say, I had a little bit of it wasn't completely 90 degrees, and I had trouble with it. Once you figure out the very simple little things like that, they just work so well. My biggest bed that I've got there is 6 meters by, which I think metrics. It's a big bed. Hold on, let me Google.
The biggest one I've done is about 12 feet by about 20 feet long. I'm sorry, yeah. It was about 4 feet wide by 20 feet long. I apologize.
Yeah, that's probably about the same length as my one. And the siphon on it works perfectly. I've got no breather tubes, anything like that. And yeah, it just works exactly the same as it does on one of the other beds. I've got the same flow going into that one as I do the smaller beds, and they both kick off perfectly. I don't have to do anything at all to it. And the siphons work really well. one of the things that I recently did was temperature checking between the siphon bed and the constant flood, because I've read up a couple of different places that were saying that you get a different, so if you've got a heat wave that's coming through, you should have it on constant flood instead of siphon. And so I did a bit of myth-busting on that sort of stuff. So I got two very precise temperatures, temperature probes, put them inside of both of the beds, and then measured the temperature when we have a 40-degree heat wave. And one of the things I discovered was that the siphon bed actually has a much cooler flow. So I found that the water coming in, so I think it's evaporative cooling that goes through it. So whenever the water comes out, the moisture and everything comes up through the stones and cools it as it goes through, which is one of the things I discovered. There's about a 0.25 Celsius difference in the water going into the constant flood and the water going into the siphon. And the siphon one is surprisingly the cooler one. So I've got a video on that coming out soon. But yeah, it's one of the
that's awesome.
that I discovered. Because you see it spouted a lot on forums and Facebook, let's say, oh, if you've got a heat wave, take the siphons out and let run it through constant flood, which makes sense in theory because you don't want hot air getting in between the stones, which warms it up. But the evaporative cooling must be cooling it down and keeping the whole system cooler.
One of the other things too is that, I mean, because you have that flooding and draining, you're getting a better gas exchange in that root zone, and that's keeping that media bed cooler. You know what I mean? Just based on the evaporative and the fact that you're drafting that cool air in that can be, you know, humidified and then pushed back out by that water layer. That's one of the biggest benefits to the when we do the dual root zone system, is that the fact that flood and drain action in that lower half of the pot acts as like a diaphragm shoving air through that upper half of the root zone. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why we get the increased growth. But that's so interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. That's so interesting. I've never done a side by side. That I've definitely on the inverse of that, I've had really good luck with flood and drain beds where we had the water at 72 or 74 degrees. At one instance, we had a wind gust of over 85 miles an hour, which is, I don't know what that would be in kilometers. My math is a little bit bad, but like 150, 170, something like that, kilometers per hour. If my math is correct, just rough math. You know, what did Bush call it? Fuzzy math. Anyways, so something like that, and we had a whole wall blow off where all the clips came off the one side of the greenhouse, and because there was so much heat in the grow bed from the hot water, even though the outside ambient temperature was 42, 38 degrees, something like that, the heat coming off that 72, 74 degree water kept all of our plants from being frozen or frost burned, because the water coming into the plant via the root zone and just the heat coming off of that grow bed, you know, created a little almost miniature humidity and heat dome around the plants that protected any of them from even getting any frost burn. And that's one of the things that I feel like aquaponics really has the ability to step in and be better than other industries, is because we can climate control through water volume much more efficiently between doing things like GAT systems, ground air thermal exchange, or through solar heating of the fish tank and the water that's running through the systems via solar water heating. Those are the two biggest advantages, aside from the cost reduction of fish food versus hydroponic nutrients, that aquaponics can provide to the agricultural industry. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's not emphasized enough in the industry as a whole, where we can produce and climate control these things at, you know, laughably low rates compared to the hydroponic or even aquaponic soil industry. And that's one of the biggest reasons why people should look at aquaponics and invest in aquaponics, as far as commercially or even in a backyard setting, why it's more cost effective.
Yes, no, that makes sense. And it's one of the things that I discovered. Water volume does the most to stabilize the temperatures, because at the moment I've got about 17,000 liters, which I don't know how much that is in your tongue, but yeah, it's a lot of water inside of the system, and it's a hell of a lot more stable. Because I found when I had about a quarter of that amount of water, when we had a heat wave that comes through, the temperature would get to about 32 degrees Celsius, which about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, roughly. And that's when it starts getting into the danger zone for some of the fish. And when there's a lot more water there, it stays really cool. So it hasn't gone over about 28 degrees Celsius throughout the entire heat waves that we have going through here. And yeah, it's just everything grows so well. I've got the next door neighbors that have traditional soiled gardens out the back, and they've got tomatoes growing. And I find when we have a massive heat wave that comes through, their crop just gets wiped out completely. So you look at some of their plants, all the leaves are dying on top of it. And mine, full sunlight, looking straight up, and they're not even wilting at all inside of the system. I say it goes through a hell of a lot more water in those sort of days, but and that's one of the good things about, against traditional dirt farming that we have in the state as well, because you've got to put a hell of a lot of water in that to keep it going throughout the summer. And we use hardly any of this, which is, I think, really cool.
Absolutely. So what are, I guess, what advice do you have to people that are just starting to get interested in aquaponics, or that are looking to get started and building their own first garden?
For people just starting is don't overthink it. If you want to see if it works, you want to see how it works, get yourself an IBC, chop it, put some gravel, something cheap in the top one, fish in the bottom, pump it back and forth. That's the easiest way to get it started, and one of the simplest to get good results out of it, because you've got a decent, you don't have masses of water inside of it, but you've got enough to get it started. If you try with something like a barrel, then you don't have as much water temperature and you can have more troubles coming out. So the bigger the system is, the more stable it will be. And once you see how it works, then that's when it's time to expand, and expand into the room that you have. So, and to the climate and conditions that you've got as well. Because in the US, and you've got really cool climates, you'll need greenhouses and that sort of stuff. But it really depends what these things. But yeah, just give it a go, basically. It's not as complicated as what a lot of the forums and that sort of stuff makes it out to be. And some of the videos, you look at some of the YouTube videos, and they go through all the complicated things that they're doing. And it doesn't need to be that way. You're pumping water from the fish tank to a grow bed and back. You can overcomplicate it. So once you get more fish in there and you've got solid issues, you can add filters and those sort of things to it. But as long as you follow some of the basic things like stocking rates and water volume and that sort of stuff, then it's really not complicated. Follow the basics and don't overthink it. And grow what you like to eat. So that's one of the big things I'd recommend to people. They say, oh, what can I grow in there? And basically grow what you like to eat. If you things like beetroot, if you never eat beetroot, then don't bother trying to grow it because you don't particularly like it. If you look at what you buy at the shops weekly, if you buy lots of tomatoes, then grow lots of tomatoes. If you buy lots of lettuce, grow lots of lettuce. And just try and keep your shopping bill down by what you can grow in the backyard.
Wonderful.
And let me know if I talk too fast, because I have a habit of doing that when I start waffling on. I just have to keep myself talking slowly. I can usually edit it out of videos, but this is live, so it's a little bit harder.
Well, I just spent half a year living in Jamaica, so I'm used to people speaking in really fast patois. But yeah, maybe just speak slightly slower. I guess. So what are some of the common supplements people use for aquaponics in Australia versus maybe not versus the United States, but what are the most common ones used in Australia?
The most common one's probably iron, because it's the one thing that you can't get inside of the fish food. You can get it, so pretty much no fish food that I know of has iron that's already built into it. So you got to add the chelated iron, and that's pretty much the only one that you need to add. When you're starting off a system, there's things called sea salt, which you get in Australia, which I don't think you get overseas, but it's basically a seaweed extract, and it has all the micronutrients that will take a little bit of time to build up from the normal fish feed itself. And you add that in, and you can start planting straight away. Everything will grow very well off that. If you want to complicate things after that, then there are phosphorus, there are potassium, there are things like that that you can add, but it's really not necessary when you get started. You just want things to grow and to grow well. And yeah, so iron is pretty much the only one major thing that you need to add, and yeah, keep it simple.
What is the common fish feed down there? Are you guys all using pellet feed, or are you guys doing insects, or what is it that you guys use for the bulk of your feed down there?
Pretty much I think the same as what you got there. Have you guys got spreading seafood, fish food? Is that an Australian one, or is that an overseas one?
Okay.
So spreading is the major fish food that we use here. I've seen a couple of people experiment with other things. Like I've seen some people on the forums that have had their own stuff made up out of land-based soybeans and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I basically use the normal spreading aquaculture fish food. And it works really well. I get massive growth out of the goldfish. The plants thrive. And I've found as long as it's a really oily-based fish food, then the plants and the fish do really, really well. When you find that it's a very dry-looking fish food, then they don't do as well.
Okay. The what is your recommendation on the first set of plants that people should try for an aquaponic system?
Whatever you like to eat. First thing that I put in the system when I did it was tomatoes, and they grew fantastically. So I've heard a couple of people say that you need to let the nutrients build up in the system before you add things like tomatoes, which will take a lot of nutrients out of the system. But I found that adding a little bit of sea salt or sea salt power seeds, like seaweed-based extracts to the system, just help everything grow really, really well from the beginning. So I saw some things that should only grow lettuce in the first year, but I think it's crap, to be honest, because everything grew really, really well in the first season. The second season, it went even better. The third season, it went even better. But compared to the dirt gardening that I was doing, they just took off and they grew far, far, far better. So anything really, whatever you want to eat, throw in there. Because the worst thing that could happen is that the plant dies. And it's really not that bad of a thing. Like, I mean, it sucks if the plant dies, but that's the worst outcome that you get from it, then that's really not that bad. So experiment with it, throw seeds in there, throw whatever you want in there. Don't listen to too much online, because I found things like fruit trees, they didn't grow, but I've seen other people that are growing them with massive success. So what works for one person might not work for another one, so experiment. Things like cucumbers, for some reason, last year they did not want to grow for me at all. This year they are thriving. So I couldn't really explain it, but yeah, because
That's definitely, I guess my biggest advice for cucumbers and squash especially is to add silica to your system. They tend to have a pretty severe silica sensitivity, and especially when it comes to fending off fungal infections. When you have the proper silica levels, it really dials them in and really helps them fend off. You don't get that white powdery buildup on the leaves, and the plants tend to yield a little bit more.
So how do you usually add it? Are you adding silica sand to the grow bed, or is it?
So you know how, like, traditionally, if you're going to dose your potassium, you need this potassium carbonate and calcium carbonate. That's commonly sold as a pH up, or potassium hydrate or hydroxide. I'm sorry, or calcium hydroxide. Yeah. Instead of using those potassiums, you use potassium silicate. Is the easiest way in order to adjust. It'll raise your pH pretty similarly, and it'll account for your silica.
Okay, no, I'll give that a go.
And it's fairly cheap.
There, so that might be why I'm having some issues with it. I haven't tried any of it before. So how much does it raise the pH by? Because that's one of the things that I've got an issue in my system. There's a lot of lime-based. I think when they condition the water in our state, they add a lot of lime-based stuff to it. So I've got a very high naturally pH, and it takes a while for it to come down. So that's why I added potassium nitrate, because I didn't want the pH to shoot up too much. But how much do you find it increases normally through
silica? So if you're trying to use that, you can also use silicon dioxide, which has a small increase in pH, but a much slower pH, but it's much more expensive. But it's a much less pH increase.
Okay. Do you know any resources that have all that sort of information in it, like how much to add to X amount of water or X amount of parts per million increase? Or
I don't off the top of my head, but I have all that stuff on hand, and I'm happy to email it over to you.
Yeah, email it to me. Curious about it, because it's so hard finding that sort of information online, because there's just not much about it. Like trying to find the nutrient profiles for the tomatoes took me a hell of a lot of Googling before I'd be able to find how much potassium for different growth periods and that sort of stuff. But, yeah, so if you got information, email it to me. I might try and put it in a video. I'll give you a heads up.
Absolutely. In the States, we have a product called Mad Farmer Silica, which is potassium silicate, and that's one of my favorites as far as people that are in the U.S. that are looking to purchase something off the shelf. I'm sure there's an equivalent, similar type product in Australia. I'll just have to do a little research to send you a link.
Yeah, send me the information for it. Yeah, because one of the things I have had trouble with fungal stuff on the cucumbers, I'll get about 3/4 of the way through the season, and then you start getting the rust on them, and you'll start getting the powdery mildew and those sort of things. And I'm a little bit too lazy to start treating them with milk and those sort of things, because I'm a bit lazy with it. And tomatoes just seem to thrive next to them. Things like pumpkin as well, I haven't had much luck in it, because by the time that the plant gets big enough to start putting out the fruit, then you usually get the powdery mildew, which I think is an issue with my area as well. But
so I'm glad you brought that up. So lack of silica is one of the biggest causes of powdery mildew outbreak. If your silica and calcium and magnesium are dialed in, it is really hard for powdery mildew to get established. And even if it does, it doesn't take off like wildfire like it traditionally does in an aquaponic system because of the humidity and the high nitrogen. It makes it a very favorable environment for that. But as long as you're dosing your silica above 80 parts per million to 120 parts per million, if you're growing a lot of squash or a lot of cannabis in your system, that really makes a absolute night and day difference. I've done this both in an outdoor and an indoor setting multiple times, and it just completely eradicates how the ability for those fungal spores to spread throughout a room. It keeps them isolated so that you can just axe the one or two plants that happen to have it and then just be done with it. You don't have to worry about it taking over your grow or whatever. But it's one of the things that, especially in a closed environment, I've had a lot of luck testing for.
Yeah, because it's one of the things I've had trouble with. Like I've tried pumpkin, and they just never seem to get through the season without dying off. Same thing in the soil as well, because I think it's just I've tried growing them in the soil, and I can't really get particularly far with it. So yeah, I'll give it a go next season. It's starting to get a little bit late in the season to plant some more, but yeah, I'll make sure I try it for next season. I've heard of it that much, so yeah, I'll give it a go.
That's awesome. I had a quick Aquaponic Dummy was kind enough to donate a product as a giveaway for this episode. He's donating a free Hannah iron checker. It's an HC iron color meter, 0 to 5 parts per million range, which is exactly what you need for cannabis growing or vegetable growing or lettuce growing or whatever it is you're doing for aquaponics. I want to give him a big shout out. Leave a comment in the video, and we'll pick a winner. He'll pick a winner, and then whoever wins he's gonna mail that to you. You must be within the lower 48 states of the United States, and his company is Van Buren Hydroponics LLC, based out of Maine. And if you guys are interested or you happen to be up in Maine, give him a call at 207-868-4115. That is a non-paid promotion. Not giving me anything financially, just full disclosure, because I know that it's come up a lot in other industries. Anyways, he's a real good friend of the show. He's been on the show before, and he was kind enough to donate that to us. So please give him a shout out and thank him, and leave your love on the video, and we'll pick a winner before next episode, and we'll announce that on the next episode. So thank you very much for him for taking the time to donate this and trying to participate, and we'll get him back on the show again soon. I know he's been through a lot of crazy stuff up in Maine with their legal rigmarole and all the fun stuff with them trying to get established, and we're going to get him on the show again soon to talk about how that I guess I'm trying to think of the best way to word it. I don't want to use the word clusterfuck, but the unrolling of their cannabis laws have been working, as far as I know. They definitely almost went back on the fact that they were going to allow cannabis clubs and a few other things, and that maybe in jeopardy now, and it's been kind of a complete mess, almost as bad as Jamaica or Puerto Rico. So it'd be great to get him on the show soon. So
no, it's really nice to learn that sort of stuff. Hope somebody good gets it. Actually, I do have a question for you might be able to help with.
Sure.
What do you use for testing a lot of the things in your system? So the like the phosphorus, the potassium, the silica, what sort of things do you use to test the levels inside of it?
So for phosphorus, there's a planted aquarium test kits that you can get that test within the range that we're looking for. I think they test up to 80 parts per million, some of the higher end ones. Hannah makes them, Lamotte makes them, and then hold on, I'll pull up the other company that makes the other really good tests. Hannah,
Are they digital ones
or they vary depending on the accuracy and the range that you want to do. Give me 2 seconds.
The ones that I've been using are the ones that I've been using. There's a planted aquarium one like you've been talking, but you put the drops into it, you put a little bit of water, you shake it in, and the one that I've got doesn't go down to the fine enough scale. So potassium, I've been trying to keep it around 200 parts per million, and the test of the lowest it gets to is to about 300 parts per million. So I've been adding more drops in to try and keep it, to try and get an accurate enough reading. But I wasn't sure if there's anything that's more dialed into what we need to do, or something that has more tests inside of it, or for the different silica levels.
Sure. So for for instance, if you're trying to do like for most aquaponics, 0 to 30, you'll get you pretty close. Or you can do if you want to test up to 60, you just cut the volume in half. So I dose half that amount of water and then add the other half is RO water so that it's pure, and you can do what is called a like a half test, or there's a scientific name for that. Anyways, you can use that to test higher based on the volume level as long as you're accurate on it. But Hannah has a phosphorus high range checker that you can range 0 to 30 parts per million, which is unless you're growing cannabis, will generally cover what you're looking for in that. And then for potassium, Lamotte has the best test kit. Lamotte has they're a Canadian-based company, and they have a test kit that measures 6 to 60 parts per million, which is really good. And that extremely accurate. And again, you can do the half scale tests. Or the other company I would recommend you to is Red Sea Phosphorus kits, which measure 150 to 450 parts per million, which is anything that that's ideally for vegetable greens. You want about 60 parts per million. For flowering plants, you want between 1 and 200 parts per million, depending on what you're doing. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. For I'm sorry, I disregard what I just said. Those were for potassium. I was just looking at the wrong column on my own chart. I apologize. So the best test kit for phosphorus, I apologize, is the Hannah test kits, and you can do a half scale test as long as you're cutting it with RO water and get higher than that, which is 0 to 15 parts per million. And then the Hannah high range, which is 0 to 30 parts per million on the phosphorus. And then your ideal for greens, lettuce production is 18 to 20 parts per million. And then for flowering plants, you're looking at like 15 to 40 parts per million, depending on which crop you're going for in an aquaponic system, assuming, optimal, everything is optimal. And both of those kits come with 20 tests per kit out of the box, and you can order, replacements after that. Just remember that anytime you guys order from Hannah Direct, it takes an extra long time to get their. They take a long time to ship. The turnaround isn't the fastest, so order it before you think you need it. And then for potassium, I apologize earlier. My favorite test kit for that, Elios has a 0 to 400 parts per million. Red Sea is 150 to 450 parts per million. And those two are the best as far as, in my opinion, for the range you're looking at for fruiting crops or cannabis. If you're trying to like at home test your system, and those range between $37 and $44, depending on at minimum.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I'll have to check them out.
Yeah, just that's a great question. I don't think we've ever talked about that. The companies that I would recommend to you, if you people are looking at home and you're trying to develop your own methods or your own testing and trying to be super scientific about and precise about what you're growing at home, check out Hagen, which is Hagen. They have a wide range of products on their website. They're based out of Germany. You have Hatch, HACH, which is another company, which does a lot of testing equipment. You have API, which is Aquarium Pharmaceuticals, which I worked at when I was a teenager. I used to work at their Chalfont, Pennsylvania facility. I used to actually work in their laboratory where they used to have zombie fish. They'd have fish that had ick and every manner of fish disease you guys could ever think of, and we'd breed healthy fish and then intentionally infect them for the purpose of treating them with different products that we would produce, but we had to keep a huge stock of fish alive for testing purposes, and it was one of my first jobs in the aquarium / aquaponic industry at all. Then you have Hannah, which is an extremely accurate electronic testing company. One of the things that I would say is really awesome about Hannah checkers is the fact that you can be totally colorblind and use Hannah checkers. It gives you a digital readout with a digital reading and an exact number on the display. So If you can't see colors, it doesn't matter. You don't have to read a color chart. It'll give you a dialed in digital readout of what your parameters are, rather than having to deal with something like reading a color chart and comparing it to that, which for colorblind people can be really difficult at times. And that's honestly how I was first introduced to Hannah, was a colorblind solution, because when I worked at Philadelphia, we had a lot of colorblind customers, because for those of you who don't know, colorblind people are between 8 and 11%, depending on country, of the population. So it ends up being more common than you'd think. So they're one of the best go-to companies as far as not like super. I mean, they're expensive, but they're not super expensive. But if you're colorblind, it gives you an option to do hobbies and things that you otherwise would be closed off to because of the testing equipment. And then Red Sea is an aquarium company in the United States. And then the other company I recommend people to look into is Lamotte, Lamotte. They're a Canadian-based company that does extremely high sensitivity levels tests, and they have tests for damn near everything, to the point where it's kind of ridiculous, some of the stuff that they have. So, between those companies and a company called Elios, ELOS, is the other company I'd recommend. Between all of those, you can generally find the test kit that you need. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a topic that I've never thought to bring up, but I actually have a ton of information on. So I very much appreciate you bringing that up.
No, it's all good. It's just some of the stuff I haven't been able to find that much information. I'll figure it out as I go, and you do aquaponics, water testing, and anything beyond nitrates, ammonia, and those sort of things. You can't find that information for. So it's good information to have.
I'm actually in the process of writing a couple different books right now on aquaponics specifically, and in that is links to test kit products and ranges. And one of the things that I did when I used for helping people out when they messaged me is, and if anyone has a problem or any question, again, always ask me. We love to have questions that we ask on the show. We love to answer them on the show and help everyone learn, rather than just answering your individual question via email. We love to help people via email. But when we get questions via email, we love to answer them on here, so that as many people can learn from the process as we can. And one of the things I did was build a big test kit spreadsheet, and I use it for when I'm giving advice and things like that. And if you're trying to check those kind of stuff, it's definitely something that's helpful to have. If anyone ever has a question on that, or I'm really happy that we had a chance to get to this question, because it's one of those ones where it's super important, especially if you're trying to develop a particular model or XYZ, or focus in on a particular problem. It really helps isolate things, which coming from a computer and IT background, one of the I guess ways you'd describe trying to determine where a problem is, especially when you work on like large scale projects, is fault isolate, which is, I guess, a military-ish term. I used to work for the Armory Post Office, full disclosure, at one point in my life, as a contractor, not as an enlisted person. And they call it fault isolate, and that was where you had to determine a problem, but without that type of information, or at least a recommendation for companies to go to look for this type of home testing equipment without having to send off. Now, for the amount of money of some of these test kits, you could easily send off to get a full panel done for an agricultural or mining water test, that'll give you all of the answers. But at the same time, you can get between 25 and 150 tests for each of these things, ranging for between $20 and $50, depending on how accurate and what range you're looking to test some of these nutrients on average.
Yeah, no, it sounds good. Another thing that I had a lot of trouble finding information online and that sort of stuff is the different nutrient profiles you need for different plants. Because, for example, growing lettuce and growing tomatoes, you need different amounts of potassium and all those sort of fun things inside of it. And I just couldn't find any information that was specific towards aquaponics. Because one of the things I was paranoid about is, if I'm going to add all this potassium to the water, is that going to affect the fish at all? Because I know there are some grow centers, there are some hydroponic nutrients and everything, but they've got a lot of copper, they've got a lot of zinc and that sort of stuff inside of them, which would be horrible for the fish. So I wasn't quite sure if adding more potassium and stuff like that would be an issue for it. And that's one of the things that I was paranoid about putting the information online before I completed it for a season because I wasn't sure what was going to do what to the water, the fish, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I experimented and tinker with that.
Well, I actually have an incredible amount of data on that. Is there any particular question that you have on that? So just for those of you who don't know, like I have data from many, back when I used to work for the aquaponics source, I had the ability to email a whole bunch of different universities, commercial grows, and a bunch of other things, and I collected a ton of data. And when I left there, that was one of the things that I got as, part of me leaving there. Was all the data that I worked on, and I used that to compile a whole bunch of averages based on people's actual real world production. I have an enormous amount of data from a very wide range, everything from commercial grows to universities to experimental grows that did really well and everything in between. So if you have a particular nutrient question, or if you just want to know what lettuce should be at or flowering plants should be at or whatever, it's definitely something that I can answer for you.
Yeah, send it to me. Because one thing I couldn't find was just basic different plants. So what are strawberries do? The strawberries the same as tomatoes? Can you grow capsicums that are the same, or peppers that are the same as tomatoes? Because just different nutrient profiles to get the optimum amount of growth inside of each of them. And I couldn't find that information for the life of me. I could find it for hydroponics, but I wasn't sure if they correlate back and forth between each other because, like I say, controlling nitrates I can manage pretty well by growing different things in the system. So grow something like mint, which sucks out more nitrates and everything, which will suck out more nitrates to the system. But I couldn't find any detailed information that would, like, for the different crops. So yeah, if you got anything like that, send it to me.
Yeah,
tell us all here.
So on that exact note, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I've actually been in the process of working on scripts to make sure I get all the data that I want together for each nutrient. I'm going to be releasing a nitrogen, a phosphorus, a potassium, a sulfur, a calcium, a magnesium, an iron, a silica, a chloride, a manganese, a copper, a zinc, a boron, a molybdenum, a dissolved oxygen, sodium, and then even a few trace elements like cobalt and a few others. And doing individual videos on those, and then ranges for vegetable production and fruiting crop production. The cannabis stuff, I'm probably gonna hold on to at least for the time being, but I'm going to be doing the vegetable and the fruit production for general aquaponic growers here on my YouTube page here before too long. I actually have been working the last couple of weeks on some scripts for that, and to make sure that we have some pretty awesome content for that, and making sure that I have everything that I could possibly want to recommend and this and that.
No, sounds good. Yeah, because that sort of information is really hard to find, and like I say, I don't have the access to the universities and stuff you could get to. So yeah, very interesting to see.
Yeah, I'd love to trade information with you and add yours into the averages and stuff like that I already have.
Because I'm just making it up. I'm not making educated guesses from what I could find online, but making it up as I go and hoping that it works well. So like I found compared to last season, adding potassium to the system has just made a massive amount of difference to the leafy, to the growth and the production and those sort of things. But on the downside, lettuce has been growing like crap. I haven't been able to grow much at all. So yeah, it's just a matter of what you want to grow.
Absolutely. And again, I'm so glad you brought up two really amazing points that I didn't even think of before the show. But one, the testing kit companies that I was, I'm so happy that you brought that up so I could recommend it to people. And second of all, the fact that like, if you're going to grow fruiting crops, grow just fruiting crops in an aquaponic system. And if you're going to grow lettuce greens, grow just lettuce greens in that aquaponic system. If you even have the option of growing 2 or more systems, that makes so much more sense because you can dial them in so much better. Even in ranges that are totally fish tolerant, you can supplement the nutrients in a way that makes one grow much better than the other.
Yeah, if I had a bigger property than what I've got here, the ideal system that I'd probably set up myself would be a dual system. So I wouldn't do it so much the aquaculture side. So I'd keep one side that would be for mostly leafy greens. And then I would have another system that the solids and everything drain into, go through a mineralization tank and those sort of stuff. And on that side, I'll devote it a lot more to the fruiting sort of plants. So I'd have tomatoes, I'd have cucumbers and everything growing off that side. So I'd have 2 different loops and hopefully try and grow things quite well. So I'll keep high nitrates on the leafy green side of things, and then have it more dialed in towards specific nutrients on the tomatoes and other leafy things. So ideal world, when I have a bigger property in 10 years, when we can move out to a bigger area, then that's ideally what I want to grow and what I build up to. That, yeah, so ideal world, that's what I want.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I guess here's the question, because you mentioned earlier you use iron for supplementation. What chelate do you use or prefer for your systems?
Really the exact sort. Like I say, I've tried a couple of them. The first one I got was the one that I've seen Nate's stories stuff on which ones are bad and which ones are good. And I started off with the one that he said was very poisonous, and I was using that one for about 2 years perfectly without any issues at all. I didn't have any pH lockout. I didn't have any worries about that, and it just worked really, really well. Like I say, I've heard that there are some issues with it, but I never found them. At the moment, I'm using the one that sends your water very red. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head which one it is.
I think it's EDDHA, if memory serves me
Yeah,
right.
that's the one. Yeah, it sends the water quite red, and you can tell how much iron there is just by looking at it, which is quite handy. So you wait for it to start getting a little bit less red, and you add a little bit more, and it's a lot easier that way, I found. And it works quite well, that one. Like, you don't need to put as much in it. I found the one that I needed to, the one that he said was very, very bad, EDT something or other. But the one that he said was very bad, I needed to add a lot more to the system to be able to get out of it. The one that works really well, you put far less into it, and it sends your water red, you keep an eye on it, and it works quite well that way.
Yeah, the one that that we use the most, I guess, in the States is DTPA, which doesn't stain your water near as bad, so it doesn't cause as many total issues. The biggest problem with EDDHA is when you go to get a mass spectrometer test. Sorry, it's been a good day. You don't end up with some false readings. The issue that EDDHA causes is that when you do multi-spectrometer tests, such as in a commercial setting with cannabis or other high-dollar crops, it screws up the spectrometer testing or the GC testing, depending on what you're doing. Both of them it'll give false readings for when you run it through those. So it makes it harder to determine because it tints the water, and it makes the water not go through at the right refraction rate, and that's what gives false readings back to the system.
Yeah, I found one of the problems in Australia was actually sourcing the iron chelates themselves. Because I went into one of the hydroponic stores and I said, do you guys have any iron chelates? And they just gave me a very blank look, because they've got nutrient profiles that have got it all built into it, like the pre-mixed nutrients that you can add to it. But I wasn't going to add any of that sort of stuff to my system, because you look at some of the lists on it, it's got copper, which is in a way too high level for the fish and that sort of stuff. So just finding it and sourcing it. You can buy it from the States, you can buy it from Amazon and that sort of stuff, but a lot of them surprisingly don't ship to Australia, which is really weird. You go on there and say, oh, that one, and then it doesn't ship to Australia, which happens to a hell of a lot of stuff. So finding it online is quite tricky to deliver to Australia. So I ended up finding the same one at a normal hardware store. So the one that was supposedly poisonous is on the shelf at the hardware store. And I ended up finding I still can't remember, the red one through a guy on Facebook, and he emailed me. He bought it in way bulk. So I think he bought about, and he sent me out half a kilo, which will last me forever. So,
was it True Aquaponics, or do you remember who it was? Was it True Aquaponics?
Finding it, which was really through Amazon or through.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember for the last minute. Yeah, through Amazon was where I was trying to find it, and I just couldn't. So and you Google it, you try and find it in Australia, and it's just a nightmare.
If anyone's looking for any deficiency, if anyone's looking for aquaponic specific deficiency guides or nutrients, definitely check out True Aquaponics. He has a whole big long set of posts on different nutrient deficiencies and a wide range based on your current pH of iron deficiencies that you can dose for, and different products available. So definitely give him a shout out if you're in the US.
Well, the thing that I recommend for a lot of people with just normal nutrient deficiency is a seaweed extract or a seaweed power feed extract, because they've usually got most of the micronutrients that you're missing. So you can just add that straight into it, and it will sort out any. Because I found that that's one of the easiest ways to do it. So a seaweed extract usually has all the things that you need. I say it's not as narrowed down. So if you're trying to grow tomatoes or something, then you would need something a little bit more accurate. But just for general nutrient deficiencies, that sort of stuff has everything in it, and it takes away a lot of the guesswork for people that are confused. Because you look at a picture of a leaf online, and then you try and compare it to what your one is, it can just get lost people. And I find the seaweed extract just works really, really well for most of them.
Yeah, I'm working on a solution for that I can't tell you more about right now, but before too long, there'll be a nice little aquaponics guide out on the internet. That's very easy to use and interactable. Thank you, Aquaponic Dummy, for the comment here. You just left some cool comments in the chat here. He says it's FEDDHA that causes the red staining, and also causes the colorimeter issues with refractometers and colorimeters, and so for those of you who don't know, like color tests such as HANA testers use a colorimeter, which basically runs light, a set amount of light through this little mirror, checks what color the water looks like, and then compares that to its own internal color chart. And when you dye it with these different
FEDDHA.
Yeah, when you dye it with these different irons, it screws up the ability for that light to reflect through that water, and then it gives you false readings. And that's why you can end up with false readings for your HANA or other color meters when you use EDDHA or EDTA and not DTPA. With DTPA, you'll get 100% accurate, but they'll be extremely close. With the other iron chelates, it becomes extremely hard to regularly test for, and that's one of the biggest reasons why you need to steer away from those.
Oh, fair enough. Trying to think about any good questions that I've been thinking about. Something you might know. I've had no luck at all with basil this year. I'm not quite sure. Is the high potassium bad for basil? Do you know?
What was that? I'm sorry?
Basil. Do you know if that? Because I've had no luck at all with basil this year. I've tried growing it. I'm not sure. Pretty sure high potassium levels are growing up
potassium go between 60 and 80 for basil in an aquaponic system. Parts per million.
Yeah, so mine's definitely out there.
Or milligrams per liter, whatever your measurement is.
Yeah. I've had no luck at all this year. It's been quite sad.
The basil really does best when you have extremely high nitrogen, so like 30 to 60 nitrogen or even higher. Basil does super kick ass. Above about 60 parts per million, it starts to stretch a lot, and you'll end up with very large node spacing to where it's spacing out almost too much. So, can you hear me? You still there?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry about that.
It's breaking up a little bit, but not too bad.
Yeah, the storm is raging outside. I apologize for the hiccup there. Go ahead.
Yeah, what was I going to say? Yeah, one of the things I have trouble with mine is keeping the nitrates up, because I find that the tomatoes are just sucking straight out of it. I've had pretty much zero nitrates for a while now. I keep on adding more fish. I added 60 extra fish from the breeding experiment that I did this year, and I still can't keep the nitrates up high enough for them. I find once the tomatoes get out of it, then they start coming up again. But yeah, I need more fish, I think, or feed more often or something.
Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up? If not, I think we're gonna start to wind down the show here. Is there anything things that I think were particularly unique to Australia, or anything that you wanted to mention? You felt like maybe was underemphasized in the aquaponics industry, or especially in Australian aquaponics versus United States, or maybe a particularly
from the
point
that
of view
I've looked on, they look very similar. They look quite similar in what we can grow, and that's just like the tomatoes are tomatoes, and I just grow what I like to have. There aren't any major Australian foods that we try and grow here. There's lemon myrtle and things like that, which you wouldn't have too much over there, and some different spices and that sort of stuff. But most of the time we grow very similar. I think it's just a climate which changes a little bit, the flourisher and the growing times and that sort of stuff throughout the year. And yeah, it's quite simple. It's quite easy. I think the backyard aquaponic system is a lot bigger in Australia than it is in the States. Just looking on the forums and looking at the amount of Australians compared to the from pretty much every other country, the Australians generally dominate the backyard scene, which I'm quite happy about. And you can find people a lot easier. But I think you guys have a lot more farms over there. So we have some biggish farms over here, but I think you guys are leading the way in the farm side of things. But I think backyard side of things, Australia is doing very, very well, especially with the amount of people we have here in comparison to the States. Have a similar landmass, but nowhere near as many people here as the States.
Yeah, it's funny. We kind of consider ourselves similar sized countries, but we often forget that. So.
Yeah, so way more of you guys than there are us.
Alrighty. Well,
yeah, anybody have any questions in the comments? Not sure how many different people there are from us.
Yeah, we've had about 25 to 30 different people watch the show over the course of the thing. I'm trying to see if there's any questions in particular on the chat here.
Apart from the fun trolls.
I don't think we had anything in particular that, as far as questions. Does anybody have any questions before we wind the show up? And it happens to be in chat. Looks like we have about 12 viewers right now at the moment.
Yeah.
As far as live.
Oh, sounds good.
Okay. Well, is there any? How can people find you if they want to look more into your, your YouTube and everything? Where can they find you at?
Yep. So there is a link in the bottom of the description here, which goes to my YouTube channel. And if you search goldfish, then there's a good chance on YouTube that I'll pop up on their lines. But yeah, links below. I've got Facebook pages and Twitters and that sort of stuff. I don't use it as much, but YouTube's the general way I go through and all that sort of information. So yeah, it's down in the description. Check me out and say hey.
Well, I extremely appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. I know that it wasn't the easiest thing for you to hop on in the middle of the day out there. I think we started at about 12:30 in the afternoon your time. So I really appreciate you taking the time during the during your weekend to join us. And
I'm happy to come.
I'm happy to have you on the show anytime in the future that you're interested in hopping on. And feel free to reach out if you ever have a question. And thanks so much again.
Yeah, that's good.
For the show.
No, like I said, the best thing I got out of this one was silica, how silica to it, because I think that's probably one of my main problems that I had with growing cucumbers and lettuce and pumpkins and that sort of stuff. So I'll make sure that I'll try it next season. It's a good tip.
It helps tomatoes too,
so
especially with the tomato blight. Like you get, and the tomatoes get real old, the lower half of the plant starts to go. If you start to do silica, it kind of helps slow down, not totally prevent it, but it dramatically slows that progression. And you'll end up getting more production from the lower part of your plant as well.
I'll be giving some Googling soon.
Thanks for everyone for joining us. If you guys are interested in taking any aquaponic herb classes, I have the aquaponic medicinal herb class coming up in Ouroboros next weekend. If you're interested in taking the aquaponic cannabis class, it is, hold on, let me double check the dates on here, the 25th and 26th of March. Based in Ouroboros, which is in Half Moon Bay, California, is located near San Francisco. Both of those classes are located in the same place. Next weekend, let me double check. Yep, next weekend, the 25th and 26th of February is the medicinal herb class. And the 25th and 26th of March is the next cannabis class. If anyone's interested, definitely go check out ouroborosfarms.com. And sign up there. And if you guys want to reach me, check out potentponics@gmail.com. Marty was not able to visit us. Please go check out Marty at apmeds.com. Be sure to check out Colum's YouTube channel. He was kind enough to join us. Be sure to check out Ganja Guy's YouTube channel as well. I have a link to him in the description as well. Thanks for joining us. Also check out Aquaponic Cannabis Growers on Facebook as a Facebook group if you're interested in learning more about high nutrient. Even if you're not interested in growing cannabis, a lot of people that grow fruit trees and medicinal herbs and other high yield, hard to grow crops that aren't necessarily cannabis, but happen to have similar nutrient profiles. And we do a lot of great discussion with a lot of very intelligent people that are all involved in the industry. And we have a lot of great people in that group. So definitely check it out. I also wanted to say thanks again to True Aquaponics for listening, allowing me to work with him on the consulting stuff through his website. And if you guys need any powder nutrients, definitely check out his website. I'm going to be helping him expand some of his options here in the near future. And thanks again for joining us. Is there anything else you wanted to mention here at the end? I very much appreciate your time and the fact that you took, time out of the middle of your day to join us.
No, so we're happy to come along. Like I say, I've got nothing much else to plug. There's only the YouTube page, so check it out if you're interested. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, boss.
It's been informative stuff I didn't know. So.
I appreciate it very much, and I look forward to seeing all of you guys again next episode. And have a great day.